My boss looked me dead in the eye and introduced her 21-year-old nephew as the IT expert, who would be evaluating me. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I knew, in that instant, I was being replaced. They didn't just want me gone. They wanted me to dig my own grave. They wanted me to train the person who would take my job. So I agreed. I smiled, and I trained him perfectly to bring the entire multi-million-dollar company to its knees in less than a single day. If you know the deep satisfaction of watching incompetence get exactly what it deserves, prove it by hitting that subscribe button. Like this video, because you're about to witness a masterclass in professional revenge, where justice isn't just served, it's exquisitely crafted. Let's get into it. This all went down several years ago, back when the scars of the 2009 financial crash were still fresh and raw. I was the IT manager for a small medical supply company, and when I say small, I mean it was shrinking by the day. Business was bad, the air was thick with the scent of anxiety, and our once thriving IT department had been whittled down by layoffs until it was just me. I was the sole pillar, holding up the entire technical infrastructure of the company. It was a stressful, thankless job, but it was a job, and in that economy, that was everything. Then, she arrived. Let's call her Pam. Pam was brought in as the new chief financial officer, and I was told I would report directly to her. My first meeting with her felt less like an introduction and more like an appraisal of old furniture. She had this way of looking at you, not as a person, but as a line item on a spreadsheet, a cost to be minimized. It became immediately painfully clear that Pam's knowledge of information technology could fit on the back of a postage stamp, with room to spare. Her guiding philosophy, which she repeated like a mantra in her gratingly cheerful voice, was, "If it ain't broke, don't fix it." To a normal person, that might sound prudent. To an IT professional, it's the 4-word-long recipe for absolute catastrophe. The concept of a PC or server lifecycle, foreign to her. The idea that we needed to pay for licensing to keep our firewall, the very shield protecting us from the horrors of the internet, updated. She scoffed. "But it's working just fine now, isn't it?" she'd say, with a condescending tilt of her head. My annual budget, once a tool for strategic planning and security, vanished. It was replaced with something she called a wish list. I'd submit detailed, justified requests for essential hardware upgrades, critical software patches, things we needed to simply keep the lights on. Each request would come back with a single brutal word, scrawled across it in red ink: denied. I was a captain trying to patch a sinking ship with duct tape, and my admiral was actively trying to poke more holes in the hull to save money on steel. If Pam was the architect of the company's decay, the owners were the gleeful landlords of the whole rotting tenement. They were a husband and wife duo, real pieces of work, who oozed a kind of smarmy, new money arrogance. They treated their employees with a casual cruelty that was breathtaking. I'll never forget one quarterly meeting. The atmosphere in the conference room was heavy. People were scared. You could see it in their eyes, the nervous shifting in their seats. Someone finally got the courage to ask the question on everyone's mind. How secure are our jobs? The owner stood up, a practiced, reassuring smile plastered on his face. He put his hands up in a calming gesture and said, "I want to put everyone's mind at ease. Nobody is getting laid off. Your jobs are all secure. We are a family here." This was at 5 p.m. on a Wednesday. The wave of relief that washed over the room was palpable. People smiled for the first time in weeks. The very next morning at 9 a.m., they laid off 6 people. The firings were cold, efficient, and brutal. By noon, the office was a ghost town of empty desks and stunned silence. And that's when he showed up. The owner, he didn't come to offer condolences. He didn't come to explain. He rolled into the parking lot in a brand new, gleaming black Cadillac Escalade, the engine purring like a predator. He walked into the office, keys jingling in his hand, and proceeded to show it off to the few senior managers who were left, beaming with pride at the purchase he had just made that morning. The message was clear: your jobs paid for this. Your fear, your insecurity, it was the fuel for their lifestyle. While the owners were busy flaunting their wealth, Pam was waging her own war. In the first 6 months she was there, she began a systematic purge. One by one, every single person who had worked for the old CFO was fired. Talented, experienced accountants, payroll clerks, financial analysts, all gone. In their place, she hired her friends. I am not exaggerating when I say that 3 of her bridesmaids from her wedding a few years prior were now sitting at the desks of people with a decade of experience. I was the last one left, the only person from the old CFO's team who hadn't been replaced by one of Pam's cronies. I felt like a man on a shrinking iceberg. Every day I walked into that office, I felt a target on my back. I was updating my resume every night, sending it out into the void of a shattered job market, but finding nothing. I was trapped. I knew I was on borrowed time, just waiting for the axe to fall. And after 9 long, agonizing months, it did. Pam called me into the HR office. The air was still and cold. She sat there, a folder in front of her, with a look of feigned disappointment on her face. She blindsided me with a completely fabricated charge, an accusation of a mistake she claimed happened the day before. My mind raced. The day before? I was with the VP of sales the entire day, working side by side on a critical project. I had a rock-solid alibi. That's not possible, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I was with Mark, the VP of sales, all day yesterday. We can ask him. Pam didn't even blink. The HR manager just stared at a spot on the wall. This is not about him, Pam said, the words sharp and final. This is about you. And that's when the last bit of fight drained out of me. Remember, kids, HR is not your friend. They are not there to find the truth or do what is right. They exist for one reason, and one reason only, to protect the company, even when the company is a nest of vipers. I knew then that the truth was irrelevant. The decision was already made. This was just the theater they had to for before kicking me out the door. My days weren't just numbered. I was on the last digit. The very next morning, the final act of this corporate farce began. Pam called me to her office. Standing beside her was a kid who couldn't have been a day over 21. He had that uniquely confident look of someone who has never been told no in his entire life. "This is my nephew," Pam announced, beaming. "He's an IT expert, and he's going to be consulting with us for a bit. He'll be shadowing you, evaluating everything you do to see if we can streamline any processes." The word streamline hung in the air, a euphemism so blatant it was insulting. My blood ran cold. This was it. They weren't just firing me. They were making me train my unqualified, nepotism hire replacement. I spent the first hour with the expert. It didn't take an hour. It took 5 minutes. I asked him a few basic IT 10101 questions. His answers were a masterclass in cluelessness. This kid was the type of IT expert your grandparents think is a genius because he can hook up a PlayStation to a TV. He looked at me with a blank stare when I mentioned server virtualization. He thought a firewall was a physical wall that was on fire, and the final nail in the coffin of his credibility. He didn't even know how to join a simple PC to a company domain. It was in that moment, watching this child masquerading as an expert, that the despair I'd been feeling for months began to curdle, to harden, and to transform into something else entirely. It became a cold, sharp, brilliant idea. A plan. They wanted me to train him. Oh, I would train him. I would give him the most important lesson of his short, pampered life. The entire company, its inventory system, its billing and invoicing, the shipping and receiving that were its lifeblood, all of it ran on a series of complex scripts. Scripts that I had personally written, refined, and maintained for years. They were the invisible engine that made the whole place run. And all of them, every single one, was tied to and executed by a single all-powerful account, the domain administrator account. My plan began to take shape. I walked back to Pam's office, with the nephew trailing behind me like a lost puppy. In front of both of them, I put on a show. I raised my voice, full of professional indignation. "Pam, you want me to give him the domain admin password? The keys to the entire kingdom? This is a massive security risk. He's a consultant, not an employee. This violates every best practice in the book. I made a huge fuss. I argued. I pleaded. I made sure my objections were loud, clear, and very, very public. As I expected, Pam, in her infinite arrogance, waved away my concerns. "Just do it," she snapped, annoyed that I was questioning her authority in front of her precious nephew. "He needs full access to evaluate things properly." "Fine," I said, with a tone of defeated resignation. "But I am officially stating for the record that I am changing the password right now. You can't have non-employees knowing a password with this level of access." I turned to the nephew. The real training was about to begin. I sat him down and walked him through, step by step, how to change a user password on the domain controller. Then I showed him how to change the domain admin password itself. I showed him once. I showed him twice. I had him do it himself on a test account. I made him write the steps down on a notepad. I leaned in, my voice low and serious. "Listen to me," I said, looking him straight in the eye. "This is the most important thing you need to know. The security of this entire network rests on this password. The very first thing you should do, the absolute moment you are no longer consulting here, or the moment I'm gone, is change this admin password immediately. It's for security. You understand? You cannot let old passwords linger." I stressed the importance of changing it, but I never once mentioned why it was so important. I never mentioned the dozens of critical scripts that would instantly break the second that password was changed. I was handing him a loaded gun, telling him how vital it was to pull the trigger for his own safety, and conveniently omitting the fact that the barrel was pointed directly at the company's head. I spent the rest of the day showing him meaningless, trivial things: how to reset a user's password, how to plug in a monitor. I could have spent a year with this kid, and he still wouldn't have been qualified to manage a home Wi-Fi network, let alone a corporate infrastructure. I went home that night, and for the first time in months, I slept soundly. I came into work the next day, and it happened exactly as I knew it would. I was called into HR again. Pam and her nephew were both there, the kid looking smug. After a thorough evaluation, Pam said, with a triumphant smirk, "My nephew has found your skills lacking in many areas. We've decided to go in a different direction. Today will be your last day." I didn't argue. I didn't protest. I just nodded. I collected my final paycheck, boxed up the few personal items on my desk, and walked out the door without a single look back. I could feel the nephew's eyes on me, filled with the cheap victory of a battle he didn't even understand he was fighting. I went home, poured a glass of whiskey, and waited. The next morning, my phone rang. The caller ID flashed a name I had been dreaming of seeing. I let it ring a few times, just to savor the moment, then answered with the most cheerfully unconcerned voice I could muster. "Hello?" Her voice was a frantic, high-pitched squeal. "You need to get down here. Now." "I'm sorry. Who is this?" I asked, feigning confusion. "It's Pam. The systems are all down. Nothing is working. Shipping is completely stopped. We can't bill anyone. We can't track inventory. It's a disaster." I paused, letting the silence hang in the air. "Oh, that does sound serious," I said calmly. "It sounds like your new IT expert might be in a little over his head." There was a sputtering on the other end. He doesn't know what happened. "Look, I need you to come in. We'll pay you your regular salary to come in as a consultant and get him up to speed." The sheer, unmitigated gall. She was graciously offering to pay me my old, undervalued salary to fix the catastrophe she had personally engineered. The power dynamic had shifted so violently, it was almost giving me vertigo. "Pam," I said, my voice turning cold and professional, "I'm no longer an employee. I am an independent contractor now. My services are available, but my rates have changed. I charge $200 per hour, with a 250-hour minimum, payable in advance. $50,000. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could practically hear the gears in her brain grinding to a halt as she did the math. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost all its frantic energy and was replaced by pure, undiluted rage. You listened to me, she hissed. You did this. This is sabotage. If you don't get your ass down here and fix this right now, I am calling the police and having you arrested. This was the moment. The checkmate. I took a slow, deliberate breath and delivered the words I had been rehearsing in my head all morning. Okay, Pam. Let me just make sure I understand this correctly. You fired me. You replaced me with your completely unqualified nephew. And now you're threatening to call the police and have me arrested if I don't come in and fix what he did. I let that sink in for a second, then delivered the final blow. Tell you what, I'll hold. Please, go ahead and call the police. Explain the situation to them just as you explained it to me. I'll wait right here. Let me know what they say. A stream of curses erupted from the phone. A torrent of impotent fury. She called me every name in the book, her voice cracking with desperation. And then, with a final guttural scream of frustration, she hung up. I put the phone down, a slow smile spreading across my face. It was over. I found out later from some old coworkers what had happened. Her nephew, beaming with the pride of his newfound power and following my instructions to the letter, had done exactly what I taught him was so important. As soon as I was out the door, he had changed the domain admin password. He had secured the network. And in doing so, he had instantly broken every single automated script that ran the company. The entire business was dead in the water. For several days, nothing moved. No orders were shipped. No invoices were sent. No inventory was tracked. They had to bring in a team of legitimate expensive consultants who, after days of work, managed to go through the meticulous documentation I had left behind and piece everything back together. The fallout was swift and beautiful. The nephew was, of course, fired immediately. And Pam, the architect of it all, whose nepotism and arrogance had cost the company hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost business and consulting fees, was gone within a month. In the end, I didn't have to sabotage anything. I didn't have to break any laws or act unethically. I just gave them exactly what they wanted, an unqualified, arrogant fool in a position of absolute power. Sometimes, the most satisfying way to watch a house of cards crumble is to simply hand the deck to the people who built it and let them play their game. And that's how you turn a termination into a total, unmitigated triumph. What's the most blatant case of nepotism you've ever seen go spectacularly wrong? Drop your own story of workplace justice in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss another story of vindication being served cold. Until next time,